I remember the first time I truly noticed my mind wandering, slipping into the endless cycle of thoughts that never seemed to stop. It was as though my consciousness had become a restless river, rushing over rocks of worry, regret, and anticipation, never pausing, never still. That day, I found myself sitting beneath a sprawling Bodhi tree at the edge of a quiet monastery garden. The air was warm, but carried the subtle chill of early morning, the kind that reminds you to be present before the sun fully awakens. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of damp earth and jasmine, trying to still the torrent of my mind. As I exhaled slowly, I reminded myself that this moment was not about controlling my thoughts, nor about judging the chaos that had become habitual. It was about noticing, to observe the river, not to drown in it. I allowed each thought to surface, merely acknowledging it before letting it drift away, like leaves floating downstream. And in that small practice, I felt the faintest hint of relief. My mind, which had been so loud, began to soften, like a distant echo fading into the quiet. A monk, moving silently through the garden, approached me and simply sat nearby. He did not speak. There was no need. I felt the presence of calm that did not demand anything from me. A quiet patience that seemed to say, everything is as it should be. You are here. That is enough. In that silence, I became aware of the subtle movements of my body, the rise and fall of my chest, the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. Each breath was a thread connecting me to the world around me, grounding me in the simplicity of being. I began to notice the small details, the way a leaf trembled with the slightest breeze, the soft hum of bees in the nearby flowers, the distant murmur of a river. These were not distractions. They were reminders that life itself carries lessons in subtlety, in presence. Every movement, every sound, every particle of air contains wisdom, if I only pause long enough to perceive it. My mind had been so preoccupied with achieving peace, but I realized that peace does not come from seeking it. It comes from noticing the stillness that has always been there, beneath the noise, waiting to be acknowledged. I remembered a story once told by a Zen teacher about a student who carried a cup of water while walking through the temple grounds. The student worried constantly about spilling it, about whether it was clean enough, about whether it was worth carrying at all. And yet, when he focused only on the act of walking, the cup never spilled. The lesson was simple, yet profound. When we are fully present in what we are doing, life becomes effortless, and the weight we carry is lighter than we imagined. That day, sitting beneath the tree, I felt as though I had glimpsed that effortless way of being. I invited my mind to settle into the rhythm of the present moment. I imagined each thought as a cloud in a wide sky, drifting without resistance, without attachment. I allowed myself to feel the warmth of the sun touching my skin, the soft brush of grass beneath my hands. In that awareness, I realized that the mind does not need to be tamed. It needs to be understood, observed, and accepted. Each distraction was an opportunity to return to presence. Each wandering thought a reminder to breathe and begin again. As I continue to sit in quiet observation, I noticed a subtle shift. The anxiety that had clung to me like a shadow seemed to lift, not completely, but enough to remind me that it was temporary. I was beginning to experience the kind of clarity that comes from stillness, the kind that whispers truths too gentle for the mind to grasp immediately, but persistent enough to guide one toward wisdom. In that clarity, I became aware of a heartbeat deeper than my own, a rhythm that echoed the pulse of the universe itself. It was not separate from me. I was not separate from it. There was only the simple act of being, and in that act, a quiet joy thought the wind rustled through the leaves above, carrying a message I could not yet articulate, but could feel in the marrow of my being. Life, I realized, is neither to be conquered nor resisted. It is to be noticed, to be honored, to be experienced fully, even in the smallest gestures. My restless thoughts had been a barrier, yet now, with patience and gentle awareness, I could see that they were merely waves on the surface of a vast ocean. Beneath them lay stillness, vast and unshakable, waiting for me to return. I opened my eyes slowly, letting the light of morning wash over me. The world appeared sharper, quieter, yet full of life. I did not feel the need to chase enlightenment or insight. All I needed was this moment, this breath, this awareness. It was enough to simply notice, simply be, simply exist in the delicate balance between motion and stillness. I knew that the road ahead would still bring distractions, anxieties, and restless thoughts, but I had tasted the quiet current that always remains, waiting for me to dive beneath the surface. And so I sat there a little longer, allowing my mind to drift and return, knowing that each return was a victory in itself. The garden, the tree, the sunlight, the breeze, the gentle presence of another, these were not just parts of the world. They were teachers guiding me toward a deeper understanding of life and self. In that quiet hour, I learned that the journey of mindfulness is not about grand gestures or profound revelations. It is about the subtle art of noticing, moment by moment, breath by breath, the life that is already here, already unfolding, waiting only for us to awaken to it by the time I rose to leave. I carried with me a sense of gentle calm, a thread of presence I could hold on to. Even as I returned to the routines and responsibilities of the day, the river of my thoughts would continue to flow. But now I knew that I could watch it without being swept away, and in that knowledge, there was peace. I have always been fascinated by the way small, simple moments can carry immense wisdom. In my early days at the monastery, I thought that enlightenment was something grand, something distant, something reserved for those who had spent decades meditating in silence. Yet, as I soon discovered, Zen does not arrive with fanfare or complexity. It comes quietly, disguised as ordinary life, as everyday experiences, if only we have the eyes to see it. One morning, a young monk approached me with a question that seemed straightforward but carried a depth I could not yet comprehend. He asked, "Master, how do we become enlightened?" I paused for a moment, considering how often I had asked myself the same question, believing that the answer required years of study or esoteric knowledge. And yet, before I could respond with words, the master who had taught me leaned forward and handed the young monk a single teacup filled with water. "Bring this to the garden without spilling it," he said. The young monk's eyes widened with curiosity and perhaps a hint of apprehension. He took the cup, walking carefully, imagining that any misstep could undo the entire lesson. As he walked, the wind blew, the leaves rustled, and a small bird flitted across his path. The cup wavered slightly, and he panicked, fearing the water would spill. When he finally reached the garden, dripping with sweat and trembling hands, he bowed to the master and said, "I almost failed. How can this teach enlightenment?" The master smiled gently, not with amusement, but with a profound patience that seemed to stretch across time itself. "Did you spill the water?" he asked. The young monk hesitated, then admitted that he had not. "Then you are already learning," the master said simply. "Enlightenment is not about grand gestures or lofty knowledge. It is about presence. When your mind is fully with what you do, when attention is complete, you are already touching the truth." That day, I observed the lesson quietly from the corner of the room, realizing that I had misunderstood Zen for much of my life. I had sought miracles and signs, thinking that they were the keys to awakening. Instead, the teaching was contained in the ordinary, in the act of walking, carrying a cup, noticing the moment without distraction. It seemed almost too simple, yet in that simplicity lay an extraordinary depth. Another story that left a lasting impression involved a young student who was struggling with anger. Every day, the student would find himself irritated by the smallest things: the chatter of fellow monks, the slowness of the morning chores, the coldness of the water during meditation. One day, the master handed him a block of wood and a small knife. "Carve this wood into something beautiful," he said. The student frowned, resentment bubbling in his chest. Why should I do this? I have no skill. I will fail. But the master remained silent, watching, breathing, and waiting. The student worked reluctantly at first, focusing on the edges and corners, cutting slowly, carefully. Hours passed, and he noticed something remarkable. His anger began to fade. The rhythm of carving, the focus on each precise motion, the attention required to shape the war doll of it demanded his complete presence. The irritation that had seemed so persistent melted, replaced by a quiet satisfaction, a connection to the act itself. When he finally presented the piece to the master, it was modest, unremarkable to the casual eye. Yet the master nodded approvingly. "You see," he said, "the work itself does not matter. What matters is that you were fully present. In that presence, there is no anger, no frustration, no distraction. There is only clarity." I carried these stories with me into my own practice, realizing that Zen teachings often hide in activities that appear ordinary: washing dishes, sweeping the floor, walking through the garden, making tea. The world itself becomes a teacher if one approaches it with mindfulness and attention. Every sound, every motion, every moment of contact with life can reveal truths about impermanence, about balance, about the nature of thought itself. One afternoon, I encountered a situation that tested my understanding. A fellow monk had become upset with a small mistake I had made in preparing the evening meal. His anger was sharp, cutting through the calm of the dining hall. My first instinct was to respond defensively, to justify myself, to meet anger with anger. But I remembered the stories, the cup of water, the block of wood, and took a deep breath. I observed my own rising frustration without judgment, noticing how quickly the mind could create narratives of offense. Then I allowed a calm to settle over me. Choosing to respond with gentleness rather than reaction, I approached him quietly after the meal, bowing deeply, and spoke simply, acknowledging my error and expressing my wish for harmony. To my surprise, his anger softened. In that moment, I realized the profound power of mindfulness in human relationships. Zen was not only a tool for inner peace, but also a guide for compassionate action. By being fully present with oneself, one can approach others without the distortions of unchecked emotion, responding to life with clarity and wisdom rather than reflexive reaction. I also remember the first time I practiced walking meditation in a temple garden. At first, it seemed almost absurd to walk slowly, deliberately, focusing on each step. My mind rebelled, pulling me into lists of worries, reminders, plans, and regrets. I stumbled over my own feet, frustrated by the apparent futility of the practice. Yet, gradually, step by step, I became aware of the subtle sensations, the pressure of the foot on the earth, the shifting of balance, the rhythm of the body in motion. I noticed the air brushing against my skin, the scent of moss and flowers, the distant song of birds. Each step became a lesson, each moment an opportunity to return to presence. Over time, I learned that Zen stories and teachings are not abstract concepts. They are invitations to engage fully with the life that is already here, to recognize that wisdom does not exist in faraway mountains or in mystical experiences alone. It exists in the act of noticing, of attending, of being fully alive in every movement, every breath, every glance. And as I practiced, I began to see how the simplest stories, a cup of water, a carved block of wood, a slow step through a garden, carry truths that are vast and transformative. I understood then that beginner Zen is not about achieving perfection. It is about beginning again and again, noticing where the mind wanders and gently guiding it back. Each attempt is itself a practice, each return to presence a victory. Even when thoughts rush, even when emotions surge, even when distractions arise, the essence of Zen remains, the invitation to notice, to attend, to return to the present moment with clarity and openness. As the days passed, I found that I could bring this awareness into everything I did. Preparing tea became a meditation, sweeping the courtyard a ritual, conversations with fellow monks an opportunity to practice compassion. I began to see that life itself is full of lessons if one approaches it with the right attitude. Every encounter, every challenge, every ordinary moment can be a doorway to understanding. And through these small practices, I discovered a quiet, joyous sense of connection to the world, to others, and to myself. I realized that Zen is less about answers and more about questions, less about control and more about attention. It teaches us to notice the currents of the mind, to observe without clinging, and to find simplicity amidst complexity. Beginner Zen is, in essence, a journey of awakening to life itself, moment by moment, step by step, story by story. And as I sat in the garden that morning, carrying these lessons in my heart, I knew that I had only begun to glimpse the depth and beauty of this timeless wisdom. As I continued my journey in the monastery, I began to realize that Zen is not only about quiet moments beneath trees or the careful handling of objects. It is about understanding the patterns of life itself. The teachings I had encountered in the early days, the cup of water, the carved block of wood, the slow walking meditation, were only the beginning. They offer glimpses into a world where clarity, presence, and insight could guide every thought, every action, every relationship. Yet true understanding required more than observation. It required experience, reflection, and the courage to face life as it unfolds. One of the earliest lessons that left a lasting impression was about impermanence. The Master often reminded us that everything is in constant flux, that clinging to what is transient brings suffering. I struggled to grasp this fully at first, particularly when it came to my own attachments, my pride, my ambitions, my sense of security. One day, he told a story that changed my perspective forever. A man once approached the Master, holding a beautiful, delicate vase. He adored it, polished it daily, displayed it with care, and became anxious whenever he feared it might break. One afternoon, a child accidentally knocked it from the shelf. The vase shattered into countless fragments. The man was devastated. He ran to the Master, seeking consolation, or perhaps blame. The Master picked up a fragment, looked at it closely, and said simply, "Do you see the beauty here? It has not vanished, only transformed." At first, I was puzzled. How could destruction be seen as beauty? How could loss be transformed into insight? The Master continued, "All things, all moments, all experiences are like this vase. They are precious, yes, but fragile. Clinging to them as if they were permanent is the source of suffering." When we see the truth of impermanence, we begin to understand freedom. This teaching slowly unfolded in my life. I observe that the seasons change, leaves falling to the ground in autumn, buds blooming in spring, rivers swelling with rain and receding in summer. I noticed that my thoughts, emotions, and attachments followed similar patterns. Anger would arise and fade. Joy would blossom and dissipate. Fear would grip and release. The rhythm of life was constant, yet ever-changing, and the recognition of this flow brought a quiet peace that no resistance could provide. Another profound lesson was about the nature of suffering. At first, I assumed that suffering was something external, a consequence of hardships, misfortune, or injustice. Yet, through countless conversations with the Masters and personal reflection, I realized that much of human suffering is created within the mind. It is born of clinging, judgment, comparison, and resistance. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of chores and meditation, I approached the Master and confessed my frustration with life's challenges. He smiled gently and asked me to walk with him through the monastery grounds. As we walked, he pointed to a pond, its surface rippling with the breeze. "See how the water responds to the wind," he asked. "It moves, it dances, it shifts, yet it remains water. It does not resist the wind. It does not judge the ripples. It simply is." Suffering, too, is often a result of resistance. When we meet life as it comes, without clinging or aversion, we find that the mind can rest. I tried to absorb this wisdom as we continued our walk. I imagined my own thoughts as ripples on the pond, sometimes strong, sometimes subtle, but ultimately part of a larger, flowing presence. When I stopped resisting my emotions, when I stopped fighting the natural course of events, I discovered that peace was not a distant goal, but an inherent quality, waiting to be recognized. The Master also emphasized the importance of simplicity. He often said that humans complicate life unnecessarily, chasing desires, expectations, and illusions. One day, he handed me a broom and asked me to sweep the courtyard. I approached the task with my usual impatience, wanting it done quickly so I could move on. Yet the Master observed me silently and then said, "Sweep the courtyard as if your life depends on it. Notice the dust, the motion of your hands, the rhythm of your body. In simplicity lies clarity." I followed his instructions, slowing my movements, paying attention to each sweep. Gradually, I found that my mind quieted. The past and future faded, and only the present remained. Each motion became meditation. Each observation became insight. I realized that life's true richness is often found in small, seemingly mundane acts, performed with awareness and care. The simplicity of sweeping, washing, or preparing a meal became a mirror reflecting the deeper truths of existence, presence, patience, and purpose. Another lesson I embraced was the interconnectedness of all things. In the monastery, every action, every thought, every breath seemed to ripple outward, affecting everything else. I saw how kindness could transform a tense moment into harmony, how attention to detail could create beauty, how patience could prevent conflict. One day, while tending the garden, I noticed the intricate relationship between plants, soil, insects, and water. Nothing existed in isolation. Each element depended on the other. I realized that my own life was similar. My thoughts, my actions, my presence influenced those around me in ways I often did not perceive. Understanding this interconnectedness brought humility, responsibility, and a deep sense of compassion. I recall a particular encounter with a fellow monk who was struggling with jealousy. He resented another monk's abilities, accomplishments, and recognition. His envy had begun to disturb the harmony of our community. The Master invited us both to sit by the pond and observe the reflections of trees in the water. Notice how each reflection appears different depending on the ripple, he said. Yet the trees themselves remain unchanged. So it is with the mind. When we allow envy and judgment to ripple through our thoughts, we distort reality. But when we recognize our own nature and the nature of others, we can see clearly without distortion. This lesson struck me profoundly. I realized that much of human suffering arises from distorted perceptions, attachments, and comparisons. Zen teaches us to return to clarity, to observe without judgment, to see things as they are, rather than as we imagine them to be. In doing so, we cultivate compassion, patience, and understanding, not only for others, but also for ourselves. I also learned that insight often comes through paradox. The masters frequently spoke in riddles, stories, or simple acts that seemed contradictory at first. One famous story told of a student who asked, "Master, what is the path to enlightenment?" The master answered, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep. When angry, notice it and let it pass." The student was frustrated. "Surely there must be more than this," he exclaimed. The master smiled and said, "This is more than enough. Life itself is the path. Presence itself is the teaching." At first, I did not understand how ordinary actions could embody such profound wisdom. Yet over time, I realized that the seemingly simple acts of eating, sleeping, working, or walking could be opportunities for mindfulness, insight, and clarity. Enlightenment was not a distant goal, but an ongoing practice of noticing life, moment by moment, without attachment or aversion. Another insight I gained was about acceptance. Life, I discovered, cannot be controlled entirely. Plans fail, expectations collapse, people change, and circumstances shift. Resistance only creates suffering. One morning, a sudden storm flooded the monastery grounds. We had worked for hours preparing the gardens, and I felt frustrated, my hard work seemingly undone. The master approached and said, "Do you resist the rain, or do you accept it as part of the world? Notice how it nourishes the earth, how it cleanses, how it transforms." I stepped into the rain, feeling its cold touch, listening to the rhythm on the rooftops and leaves. Gradually, frustration melted into wonder. The storm became a teacher, illustrating impermanence, transformation, and the futility of clinging to outcomes. I understood that acceptance is not passivity. It is the recognition of what is, allowing us to respond with clarity, compassion, and wisdom through countless such experiences. I began to see that Zen insights are not abstract principles, but living realities. They are woven into the texture of everyday life, waiting to be discovered through observation, patience, and reflection. Life itself becomes a teacher, guiding us through challenges, joys, losses, and ordinary moments with lessons that are subtle yet profound. I remember another story of a monk who carried a heavy basket of rice to feed the community. Along the way, he tripped, scattering the rice across the path. At first, he despaired. Yet the master observed and said, "Do you see the opportunity here? Each grain scattered is a lesson. Observe your reaction and learn from it." The monk reflected and realized that frustration arose only from his attachment to perfection, not from the event itself. In that moment, he began to practice letting go, embracing the impermanence of outcomes, and finding contentment in the act of effort itself. These experiences taught me that insight is not about avoiding mistakes or seeking control. It is about awareness, presence, and reflection. Life offers lessons constantly if we are willing to notice, to pause, to observe without judgment, and to learn from even the smallest moments. In every action, thought, and interaction lies an opportunity to cultivate clarity, compassion, and wisdom. As I sat in the garden one quiet evening, reflecting on these lessons, I realized that the path of Zen is a journey without a final destination. It is a continuous unfolding of awareness, a deepening understanding of the nature of the mind, the world, and the self. Each moment holds the potential for insight. Each challenge carries the seed of learning. Each ordinary experience can reveal extraordinary truths. In embracing these lessons, I began to notice a shift within myself. My mind, once restless and reactive, became more patient, more observant, more attuned to the present. I found joy in simplicity, understanding in difficulty, and peace in acceptance. Life itself became a tapestry of teachings, each moment a story, each encounter a mirror reflecting the truths I sought. And so, I continued to walk, breathe, observe, and reflect, carrying with me the insights of countless ordinary moments transformed into extraordinary wisdom. I understood that the journey is not about arriving at enlightenment, but about living with awareness, embracing impermanence, cultivating compassion, and finding clarity in the midst of life's constant flow. Zen, I realized, is not something to attain, it is something to live. Moment by moment, lesson by lesson, breath by breath. As I progressed further along my path in the monastery, I began to sense that something within me was changing, though I could not yet name it. It was subtle at first, softening of resistance, a quieting of the mind, a sense that life's challenges no longer clung to me as tightly as before. The teachings of Zen, once abstract lessons in stories and exercises, began to unfold as living, breathing experiences within my own consciousness. I realized that transformation is not an abrupt event, a single moment of revelation, but a gradual shift, a gentle reordering of perception and understanding that allows freedom to emerge. One morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, I found myself sitting in meditation longer than usual, feeling a restlessness I had not recognized before. My mind spun with memories, regrets, anticipations, and desires. And yet, as I observed each thought without judgment, I noticed a subtle space opening between the impulse and my response. This space barely perceptible at first, grew with attention. It was as though I had been living in a storm, and for the first time I glimpsed the calm that existed at the center of it. In that calm, I felt a freedom that I had not known I was seeking. The master noticed my prolonged meditation and approached silently, sitting beside me without a word. He did not instruct or correct me. He simply existed there, a mirror of stillness. In his presence, I became aware of the habitual chains I had carried, attachments to outcomes, fears of judgment, clinging to ideas of who I should be. I realized that much of human suffering stems from these invisible chains, from the mind's endless desire to control, define, and resist. Liberation, the master had always said, is not found by fleeing the world, but by understanding it deeply. Seeing clearly the nature of thought, desire, and self. One story that the master often recounted resonated deeply with my own experience of transformation. A young monk had once approached a river carrying heavy stones in a basket on his back. Each stone represented a worry, a fear, a memory of the past. The weight pressed upon his shoulders, making every step laborious. He stumbled, frustrated, and wondered how he could ever reach the other side of the river. The master appeared and said, "Notice the basket. What do you carry that need not be carried? Lay down the stones one by one. Only then can you cross with ease." At first, the young monk hesitated, clinging to the stones as if they were part of his identity. Yet gradually, with awareness and courage, he began to release them. Each stone dropped into the river was a burden lifted, a thought freed, a fear surrendered. By the time he reached the opposite shore, he was lighter, freer, and more alive than he had ever been. I understood then that transformation is not about accumulating wisdom or skills, but about letting go, releasing the burdens, illusions, and attachments that obscure clarity and peace. In my own practice, I encountered moments of resistance that tested this principle. Old habits of worry and judgment arose, sometimes so persistently that I felt powerless against them. Yet I learned to observe these patterns with compassion rather than frustration. I noticed how anger and fear were not enemies, but signals, messengers, revealing the mind's attachments and misconceptions. Instead of reacting, I allowed them to exist, acknowledging their presence, and gradually, they dissolved into the background, leaving a sense of spaciousness and lightness. A pivotal experience came during a long period of walking meditation through the monastery gardens. As I moved slowly, deliberately, with attention on each step, I became aware of a deep inner tension that had gone unnoticed for years. It was subtle, a tightening in my chest, a sense of urgency that I had always carried silently. I paused, taking a deep breath, and focused entirely on the sensation without labeling it as good or bad. I traced it with awareness, following its flow, observing its rise and fall. Gradually, I noticed that the tension began to release, not forced, not resisted, but naturally, as if my attention itself had created space for freedom. The Master's teachings emphasize that true liberation arises not from struggle, but from understanding. Effort is necessary, yes, but struggle, born of resistance, often strengthens the very chains we wish to break. Insight allows the mind to recognize its own patterns, to see where clinging creates suffering, and to release without force. This process, repeated countless times, leads to a profound transformation, mental liberation that is both gentle and enduring. One evening, during a quiet meditation at dusk, I reflected on the impermanence of all things. The sky shifted from gold to rose to deep indigo, stars appearing like tiny lanterns suspended in the vastness. I thought of my own mind, the countless worries and desires that had once seemed unshakable, and I realized that just as the sky changes naturally, thoughts and emotions rise and fade. Resistance is unnecessary. Acceptance, awareness, and gentle observation are enough to cultivate freedom. In that moment, I felt a lightness I had never experienced before, a sense that life could be engaged fully without fear, without grasping. Without resistance, the Master also taught me that transformation is deeply intertwined with compassion. Mental liberation is not only about freeing oneself from suffering, but also about seeing clearly the suffering of others and responding with wisdom and kindness. I observed fellow monks struggling with their own pattern sphere, frustration, envy, and found that by maintaining my own clarity and calm, I could offer presence rather than advice, understanding rather than judgment. Transformation radiates outward. As the mind becomes freer, so does one's capacity to connect and act compassionately in the world. Another story that illustrates this principle involved a monk who had spent years in anger toward a fellow practitioner. Every encounter brought irritation, judgment, and resentment. One day, he was asked to care for a small garden, to nurture the plants and flowers daily. At first, he approached the task with impatience, seeing it as trivial. But gradually, through careful attention and repeated acts of care, he began to notice a shift within himself. His anger softened, replaced by patience, observation, and understanding. The simple act of tending to life allowed his mind to release habitual patterns of resentment. Transformation, the Master explained, often comes not through confrontation, but through mindful engagement with life. I began to understand that liberation is not a distant goal to achieve, but a state of mind to cultivate continuously. It arises in moments of awareness, presence, and non-attachment. Every thought observed without clinging. Every emotion witnessed without resistance. Every action performed with mindful attention contributes to a deepening sense of freedom. The mind becomes like water, responsive yet untroubled, reflecting reality clearly without distortion. I also learned the importance of patience. Transformation is not instantaneous. Old patterns do not vanish overnight. It requires consistent practice, gentle observation, and repeated return to awareness. There were days when I stumbled, when old fears and attachments resurfaced, when the mind seemed as restless as ever. Yet, each return to mindfulness, each act of noticing without judgment, brought a small liberation, a glimpse of the inner space that had always been present. Over time, these glimpses grew into sustained clarity and peace. Through meditation, reflection, and mindful action, I began to experience a profound shift. I noticed that I was no longer so entangled in past regrets or future anxieties. I could engage fully with the present, respond to life with clarity, and act with compassion and wisdom. My thoughts, once chains of fear and desire, became tools for observation and understanding. I discovered that the mind, when freed from clinging and aversion, is vast, clear, and capable of immense joy. One of the most vivid experiences of this transformation occurred during a silent retreat. For days, we ate, meditated, walked, and rested in quiet observation. I became aware of how subtle the mind's patterns truly are, the ways it creates narratives, judgments, and attachments without notice. And I also became aware of the freedom that exists when these patterns are observed rather than followed. Each breath, each step, each moment of attention contributed to a sense of liberation that was gentle, pervasive, and enduring. I realized that transformation and mental liberation are inseparable. To transform is to observe deeply, to release attachment, to cultivate clarity, to engage fully with life without grasping or resisting. To be liberated is to be free from the habitual patterns that cause suffering, to live with awareness and presence, and to respond to the world with wisdom and compassion. In this state, life itself becomes a teacher, and each moment an opportunity to practice, to learn, and to awaken. By the end of my time in the monastery, I carried within me a sense of quiet freedom. The mind, once restless and burdened, had become a field of observation, reflection, and understanding. I knew that challenges would continue, that thoughts would arise, and that life would unfold unpredictably. Yet I had learned that liberation is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of awareness. Transformation is not about perfection, but about noticing, releasing, and returning again to clarity and freedom. In this awareness, I found a joy and peace that no external circumstance could disturb, a serenity that became the foundation of every action, every thought, every breath. As the day drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had walked through the monastery, through the stories, teachings, and quiet moments that had slowly transformed my understanding of life and self. Each lesson, each practice, each insight had woven itself into the fabric of my consciousness, creating a sense of clarity and calm that was both profound and gentle. I realized that the path I had traveled was not a line from ignorance to enlightenment, but a circle, an ongoing unfolding in which every moment, no matter how ordinary, carried the potential for awareness, insight, and peace. I thought about the first days when I had struggled with the constant chatter of my mind, the restlessness that seemed inseparable from my own existence. Back then, I had believed that quietude was something to be achieved, that peace was a distant goal, reserved for the disciplined and the fortunate. Yet, now, after weeks of mindful walking, meditation, listening, and reflection, I understood that peace was not something outside of me to be captured. It was always present, lying beneath the noise, waiting to be recognized, welcomed, and allowed to flow freely. The stories I had heard of cups of water carried with care, of blocks of wood slowly carved, of rivers crossed by those who dared to release burdens, had become mirrors reflecting the truths I could live. They had taught me that life is not something to be controlled, but something to be observed, honored, and engaged with fully. That joy and freedom arise not from escaping challenges or erasing difficulties, but from learning to respond with awareness, patience, and compassion. That every thought, emotion, and experience can be a doorway into deeper understanding, if we meet it with presence rather than resistance. I remembered moments when frustration, anger, or fear had gripped me, making the world feel heavy and unmanageable. And I remembered how small shifts of breath, taken mindfully, a step observed fully, a thought acknowledged without clinging, had dissolved the tension, revealing the vast, calm space that had always existed within. Transformation, I realized, does not require grand gestures or dramatic change. It is the gentle accumulation of presence, attention, and understanding, practiced moment by moment, breath by breath, as I sat in the garden during the final hour of daylight. I reflected on the interconnectedness of all life, the trees, the soil, the wind. The sounds of distant birdsong were threads in the same tapestry, and I was a part of it, inseparable from its flow. Every action I take, every thought I hold, every emotion I experience resonates outward, shaping the world I inhabit. This understanding brought a quiet responsibility and a deep compassion, not only for others, but also for myself. To live mindfully is to honor life itself, to act with care, and to cultivate clarity in every choice and gesture. I realized that the teachings of Zen are not confined to the monastery or 2 hours of meditation. They exist in the very rhythm of daily life, in the simplest tasks and the most ordinary encounters. Washing dishes can become a meditation. Walking to the market can become a practice of presence. Speaking to a friend can become an expression of compassion. Each moment offers an opportunity to practice awareness, to notice the impermanent nature of thoughts and feelings, and to return again to clarity and freedom. I thought of the moments of liberation. I had experienced the times when fear no longer held me, when anger softened into understanding, when I allowed life to flow without resistance. I realized that these were not extraordinary events, but ordinary ones seen through the lens of mindfulness. The true miracle of Zen is that the ordinary becomes extraordinary when approached with attention, presence, and heart. It is in noticing what already exists that we awaken to life itself. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I closed my eyes, feeling the gentle rhythm of my breath, the quiet pulse of life flowing through and around me. I let go of the need to accomplish, to prove, to control. I allowed myself simply to be, to rest in the awareness that I am part of this vast, unfolding world. In this moment, there was no past to cling to, no future to fear, only the serene presence of now. I remembered the teachings about impermanence, about letting go, about observing without attachment. I thought about the times I had resisted, the times I had judged, the times I had held tightly to illusions of permanence. And I understood that liberation is not about erasing life's challenges, but about meeting them with awareness, understanding, and compassion. To live fully is to embrace change, to observe without clinging, to respond with wisdom rather than reflex. The garden around me seemed alive with quiet. Lessons, the rustle of leaves, teaching patience, the gentle flow of water teaching surrender, the fragrance of flowers teaching attention to beauty. I realized that every moment contains its own teaching, every breath its own insight, and that the path of Zen is not separate from life, but embedded in it. In every sound, sight, and sensation, in this final hour of reflection, I felt a profound gratitude for the teachers, for the stories, for the practices, and for life itself. Gratitude for the moments of struggle that revealed the depth of my attachments. Gratitude for the moments of clarity that showed the space of freedom within. Gratitude for the ordinary moments that contained extraordinary wisdom. I understood that the journey is ongoing, that each day offers countless opportunities to practice presence, to cultivate awareness, and to embrace life fully. And so I sat quietly, letting the evening settle around me, feeling the harmony of breath, body, and mind. I invited the gentle awareness of each moment to remain with me as the day faded into night, as thoughts drifted and dissolved, and as the natural rhythm of life continued. There was no hurry, no expectation, no need to achieve anything beyond simply being here, awake and aware. As you listen to these words, may you find within yourself the same quiet space I have discovered, the space where the mind softens, where the heart opens, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Allow yourself to breathe fully, to observe gently, to rest in the awareness of now. Let go of the need to control, to judge, to rush. Notice the life that flows through you and around you, and find peace in simply being. The journey of Zen is not about arriving, but about awakening to life as it is. It is about noticing, breathing, observing, and returning again and again to clarity and presence. Even as the mind wanders, even as thoughts arise, even as the world shifts and changes, there is always a center of calm, a space of freedom, a quiet river flowing beneath the noise. Rest in that river and allow it to carry you gently into the evening, into the night, into the serene awareness of being fully alive. Breathe deeply. Feel the rhythm of your heart. Sense the gentle pulse of life around you. Let each exhale carry away tension. Each inhale bring awareness. Know that peace is always within reach, always present, always waiting to be recognized. You do not need to chase it, earn it, or create it. Simply notice, and it is there as the night embraces the world. Allow yourself to settle into this calm, carrying with you the lessons, the stories, and the wisdom of Zen. Let them guide your thoughts, soothe your mind, and illuminate your heart. Sleep peacefully, knowing that the awareness you cultivate in each moment is a sanctuary that cannot be disturbed, a refuge that is always yours, and a gift that will continue to unfold with every breath, every step, and every heartbeat. And in this gentle closing, I invite you to rest, to let go, to trust the flow of life, and to awaken moment by moment to the serene freedom that has always been present, waiting for you to notice it. I remember the first time I wandered into the quiet of the monastery. The city behind me had been loud and restless, each step echoing with impatience and urgency. Even the air felt thick with thoughts that demanded attention work, obligations, endless worries that seemed to loop endlessly in my mind. I had heard stories of monks who moved with a kind of invisible serenity, whose lives seemed untouched by the chaos that engulfed the world. I wondered if such calm could truly exist, or if it was simply a tale people told to romanticize a life far removed from reality. But the moment I stepped through the ancient wooden gate, the sound of the city faded. The wind seemed gentler here, carrying whispers of leaves that had grown wise over centuries. I realized almost immediately that this place demanded nothing of me except presence. A monk approached me, his robe simple, his face calm, his eyes carrying a depth I could not yet understand. "Why have you come here?" he asked, though his voice felt more like an invitation than a question. I hesitated, searching for words that might capture the restlessness inside me. I am seeking peace," I said, almost ashamed of the simplicity of my admission. He nodded, as if he had been waiting for no more complicated answer, and led me to a small courtyard where sunlight filtered softly through the branches of an old tree. He told me stories as we walked, not grand tales of kingdoms or battles, but stories of the everyday, the small moments where life reveals its subtle truths. He spoke of a young monk who had been impatient with his own progress, anxious that he had not yet reached enlightenment. One day, while sweeping the temple grounds, he accidentally tipped over a pot of water, spilling it onto the stones. Frustrated, he bent down to clean it up quickly, only to notice the reflection of the sky in the puddle. For a moment, he paused and saw the clouds drifting slowly, the sun glinting against the wet stone, the faint movements of insects that had always been there, but unnoticed. In that pause, he realized that progress was not a distant goal. It was present in every action, every breath, every mindful moment. That day, the young monk felt a gentle shift inside him, a quiet understanding that life itself is the teacher. I listened, captivated, feeling the tension in my shoulders slowly release. The monk's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that seemed to reach into the corners of my mind where anxiety lived. He continued, speaking of a farmer who walked through his fields each morning, tending the rice with care. One season, a storm came and destroyed most of his crop. The farmer could have succumbed to anger or despair, but instead, he noticed how the rain had filled a small pond nearby, attracting birds he had never seen before. The next morning, he observed how new seedlings had taken root in the undisturbed corners of the field. The farmer understood that loss and gain are inseparable, that life flows in cycles, and that, even in destruction, there is a form of creation waiting to be seen. I realized then that my own mind had been constantly rushing, trying to grasp what had not yet arrived, or clinging to what had already slipped away. I had treated life as a problem to be solved, rather than a reality to be experienced. In the quiet of that courtyard, with sunlight warming my back and the wind whispering through the leaves, I understood for the first time that peace was not a destination. It was a willingness to be present, fully and without judgment. The monk taught me a simple practice, one that would become my anchor during moments of confusion. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a stone bench. "Close your eyes. Notice your breath. Let your thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. Do not chase them. Do not push them away. Just observe." I followed his guidance, feeling the air move in and out of my lungs, the slight rise and fall of my chest, the subtle sounds of life around me, birds, leaves, distant water trickling. At first, my mind rebelled, impatient to return to the worries I had brought with me. But slowly, I began to notice the spaces between the thoughts, those tiny pockets of stillness that had always existed unnoticed. In those spaces, I glimpsed something profound, the awareness that I am more than my thoughts, that life is unfolding even when I am not controlling it, that I am part of a larger rhythm that does not demand my interference. Later, I walked through the monastery gardens, noticing the stones, the paths, the small pond where koi swam lazily. Each movement seemed deliberate, yet effortless. The beauty was not in grand displays, but in the subtle perfection of each small detail. A single leaf drifting onto the water's surface felt like a lesson in letting go. I thought of all the times I had clutched at life, trying to hold on to what could not be held, and I felt a strange mix of humility and relief. The world, I realized, is not ours to control. It is ours to witness, to honor, and to flow with. I also met a young girl who came to the monastery seeking guidance. She was bright, curious, but burdened by fear of failure. She asked me if I believed peace was possible for someone like her. I shared what I had learned in those first days, that peace does not come from avoiding challenges, but from embracing each moment fully, accepting its impermanence, and observing it without attachment. Her eyes widened, as if she had glimpsed something she had long sought but never understood. In teaching her, I found my own understanding deepen. As evening approached, the courtyard glowed with golden light. The monk and I sat silently, watching shadows stretch and bend across the stones. I felt the tension of my previous life begin to dissolve, the need to rush, to plan, to fix, all softened. I realized that in this quiet space, in these small, deliberate stories, I was learning the first lessons of Zen, to slow down, to observe, to notice the subtle perfection of life as it unfolds, and to meet each moment with openness and presence. I slept that night under the open sky, feeling the weight of constant thinking lift from my shoulders. The sounds of the monastery distant chanting, wind in the trees, the gentle rustle of leaves became a lullaby, carrying me into a state of calm I had never known. In the darkness, I held on to the simple truth. Life is not something to be conquered, but something to be embraced. Each breath, each step, each story is a teacher, and I was finally ready to listen. The next morning, I awoke with the same sun filtering through the trees. But now it felt different. It was not just light, it was presence. I carried that quiet with me as I walked among the ancient stones, listening to the stories of the past whispered in the rustling leaves, feeling the rhythm of life pulse in the air around me. I realized that this was only the beginning. Peace was not a final destination, but a path, and I had just taken my first steps. Each small story, each gentle lesson was a guidepost along the way, teaching me how to live fully in the present with awareness, compassion, and patience. By the time I left that courtyard, I was not the same person who had wandered through the gate earlier. My mind was lighter, my heart quieter, and my awareness sharper. The stories had planted seeds, subtle but enduring, that would grow in the stillness of my practice. And I knew, even as I stepped back into the world outside, that I could carry this quiet with me, as a companion through the chaos, as a reminder that life itself, in its simplicity and its subtlety, is the greatest teacher of all. After the initial days of simply observing and breathing, I began to notice the patterns in my own behavior, the subtle habits that shaped the way I experienced life. It was startling to realize how often I acted unconsciously, how frequently my mind clung to expectations, judgments, and desires that brought nothing but unrest. The monks seemed to glide through life with a lightness I had never experienced. Yet I knew it was not that their lives were free from challenges. Rather, they had learned to respond differently. I wanted to understand this. I wanted to learn how to move through the world without being dragged by the currents of my own unexamined thoughts. One afternoon, while walking along the stone path that bordered the monastery's small pond, I met an elder monk named Tenzin. He noticed the tension in my movement, the way I walked, as if the ground itself might betray me, the way I furrowed my brow even when the sun shone gently on my face. "Tell me," he said, "what troubles you?" I opened my mouth, intending to describe the complications of my life: work, relationships, expectations, disappointments. But the words felt heavy on my tongue. Instead, I said quietly, "I am restless, and I do not know how to stop." Tenzin smiled, the kind of smile that seems to hold understanding far beyond words. "Restlessness is not something to stop," he said. "It is something to see, to understand, to meet with awareness. When you chase it or push it away, it grows. When you observe it, it begins to dissolve." I nodded, uncertain if I truly understood. So he shared a story. There was once a man who owned a small shop in a bustling village. He was honest, kind, and diligent, yet he was constantly anxious about his business. One day, a stranger entered and offered him a rare and valuable item for a price that seemed almost too good to be true. The man hesitated, torn between desire and caution. He sought advice from the village elder, who told him, "Do what is right, not what is easy." The man followed this guidance and politely declined the offer, and later discovered that the item had been stolen from another village. By choosing right over immediate gain, he avoided harm and cultivated integrity. The lesson is simple. Our choices, guided by mindfulness and ethical understanding, shape not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. I reflected on this story as I continued to walk, imagining how often I had acted impulsively, following the pull of fleeting desires rather than considering the consequences of my actions. I realized that Buddhist teachings were not about rigid rules or moralizing, but about cultivating awareness in each moment, about allowing wisdom to inform behavior naturally. Even small actions, how I spoke, how I treated strangers, how I responded to setbacks, carried weight. They could either plant seeds of peace or perpetuate suffering. That evening, during meditation, I thought of the many times I had judged others harshly, assuming their intentions without knowing their struggles. I recalled moments of impatience with friends, frustration with family, irritation at strangers. Slowly, I began to see the invisible threads connecting all beings, their joys, their sorrows, their mistakes mirroring my own. The Buddha's teachings on compassion were no longer abstract concepts. They were invitations to engage with life differently. I began to practice mindful speech, mindful listening, and mindful action, noticing how even the smallest gesture of kindness altered the atmosphere of a moment. The next morning, I watched a novice monk carefully sweeping the monastery courtyard. He moved with deliberation, each motion intentional, yet not forced. I asked him how he maintained such focus in repetitive, mundane tasks. He smiled softly. Everything we do can be a practice. Sweeping is not just cleaning the ground. It is a way to clean the mind. When we pay attention to each action, we are present. Presence transforms even ordinary tasks into teachings. I understood immediately. Life's lessons were not hidden in distant events or extraordinary experiences. They were woven into every breath, every step, every act of daily life. I also observed how the monks treated one another, with a balance of honesty, patience, and gentle guidance. Conflicts were not denied, but approached with care and awareness. When a misunderstanding arose over a shared task, they spoke calmly, acknowledging feelings, listening without judgment, and seeking harmony rather than victory. I realized that this practice extended beyond the monastery walls. Life would always present conflicts, misunderstandings, and challenges. But responding with mindfulness, compassion, and integrity was a choice I could cultivate one day. I walked to a nearby stream, carrying questions that had been weighing on my mind. I had been struggling with envy toward a colleague who seemed to achieve effortlessly what I had worked for years to accomplish. I watched the water ripple over stones, clear yet constantly changing, reflecting light in unpredictable patterns. Tenzin's earlier words returned to me. Observe, do not cling. Let life move as it must, and your mind will find balance. I realized that envy and attachment were like the stagnant water of a pond, clouding clarity. By allowing the mind to flow like the stream, accepting impermanence and change, I could release the grip of comparison and find contentment in my own journey. Throughout my stay, I became aware of the subtle teachings embedded in daily routines. Preparing meals was a practice in gratitude, washing dishes an exercise in presence, tending the garden an opportunity to connect with the cycles of life. I began to see that Buddhism is not a separate life, but a lens through which to view every aspect of existence. Actions, no matter how ordinary, could be infused with intention, awareness, and compassion. By choosing to act with mindfulness, I was shaping my character, influencing my world, and cultivating a calm that was neither forced nor fleeting. I remember a specific lesson from a long-time monk who shared with me the story of the wandering traveler. This traveler sought the secrets of a happy life, traveling from village to village, asking elders, kings, and scholars for guidance. Every answer he received seemed incomplete. One evening, weary and despondent, he sat under a tree by a quiet river and noticed a child playing, laughing freely, unburdened by worries. In that moment, he understood happiness is not in seeking answers far away, but in living with awareness, gratitude, and kindness in each moment. The traveler smiled, feeling the simplicity and profundity of life revealed in the ordinary. Just as I began to realize the same truth for myself, by the end of this segment, I had started to weave mindfulness into my own daily choices. I noticed the way I breathed before responding to a question, the way I carried objects with care, the way I paused before speaking to consider if my words would bring peace or harm. Every interaction became an opportunity for practice, every challenge a chance to cultivate patience and wisdom. I understood that Buddhism does not promise a life free of hardship. Rather, it teaches how to live skillfully, responding to life with clarity, compassion, and balance. Life and behavior, I realized, are inseparable from the teachings of the mind. By observing actions, understanding consequences, and cultivating awareness, I could navigate the world more skillfully. Each story, each practice, each moment of reflection was a step toward living fully, not in fear or desire, but in conscious engagement with life as it unfolds. And in this awareness, I found the beginning of a profound and lasting calm, a quiet center in the midst of life's endless movement. As I continued my days at the monastery, I began to notice that the most profound lessons were rarely spoken aloud. They were found in the spaces between words, in the silence of the dawn, in the subtle rhythm of life that seemed to pulse gently beneath the surface of everything. I remember sitting under an ancient tree one morning, watching the sunlight filter through its leaves and feeling the soft hum of the world around me. The wind whispered stories I could not yet understand, yet I felt that each rustle held meaning. If only I was patient enough to listen. I recalled the teachings of a Zen master I met early in my stay. He said that life is like a river, constantly flowing, never pausing, yet always present. Most people, he told me, try to control the river. They try to hold back the current, to shape it to their desires. But the river does not belong to them. Happiness, understanding, and insight come only when we move with it, when we observe its path and align ourselves with its flow. Those words had seemed abstract at first, but as I walked along the monastery paths, watched the clouds drift, and listened to the soft lapping of water against the stone, I began to feel their truth in my bones. I remembered a story the master shared about a monk who was asked by a traveler what the secret to wisdom was. The monk did not answer with books or complex teachings. Instead, he led the traveler to a quiet pond. They sat in silence, watching the surface. Occasionally, a leaf fell, creating ripples that spread outward, touching every corner of the pond. "Look," said the monk, "this is the nature of the mind. Thoughts rise, spread, and fade. They are not you. Awareness, like the still water beneath the ripples, is your true nature. Observe it, and you will see clearly." That story stayed with me, shaping the way I approached my own restless thoughts one evening. As dusk settled and the world seemed to exhale, I reflected on my own life. I realized how often I had been imprisoned by attachments, desires I could never fully satisfy, fears I could not fully escape, judgments that chained me to suffering. I thought of moments when anger had flared without reason, when jealousy had poisoned simple joys, when anxiety had stolen hours of sleep. In these reflections, I felt a deep sorrow not for the mistakes themselves, but for the blindness with which I had lived. Yet, in the same breath, I felt a flicker of hope, a subtle awareness that awakening was not about erasing life's challenges, but about seeing them clearly, without the distortion of my habitual reactions. I spent hours in meditation, observing my mind as it rose and fell like the ocean. At first, the waves were relentless, pulling me into memories, worries, and fantasies. But gradually, I noticed the pauses, the moments between thoughts where clarity and calm resided. I learned to meet each thought with curiosity, not judgment. I watched anger rise, noted it, and let it pass. I noticed joy appear, allowed it to expand, but did not cling. In these exercises, I discovered a profound lesson. Life is not a series of events to be endured or conquered. It is a flow to be observed, experienced, and understood with awareness. The monks often spoke of impermanence not as a concept to be feared, but as a lens to understand life deeply. I saw it in the withering of flowers, the shifting of clouds, the inevitable passage of day into night. One afternoon, while tending a small garden, I noticed a single flower that had bloomed magnificently, only to begin wilting within hours. I felt a pang of sadness, but then I remembered the teaching. Beauty and decay are inseparable. To cling to one is to deny the other. True understanding comes when we see the wholeness of life, embracing both joy and sorrow as equal teachers. There was a particular story that changed my perspective on suffering. A young monk, troubled by grief over a personal loss, approached the master in despair. He asked, "Why does life inflict pain? Why must suffering exist?" The master led him to a river and asked him to place his hand in the current. The water was cold and unyielding. The young monk recoiled. "Suffering is like this river," the master said. "You cannot stop its flow. You cannot avoid its cold. But you can learn to move with it, to feel its depth, and to understand its lessons. Pain is a mirror. It reflects attachment, expectation, and resistance. Learn from it, and you will awaken." That lesson echoed in my own life as I considered the challenges I had faced. I began to see that pain was not an enemy, but a teacher guiding me toward clarity and compassion. The interconnectedness of all beings also became increasingly clear. Observing the daily routines of the monastery, I saw how each action, no matter how small, affected others. The way one monk prepared a meal, tended the garden, or even spoke a word, rippled through the community. I realize that our actions are never isolated. They are threads in a vast tapestry. Awareness, then, was not only a personal practice, but a responsibility way to bring harmony rather than discord into the world. I recall one moment of insight while walking along a misty path at dawn. The fog obscured the landscape, and I could see only a few steps ahead. For a moment, I panicked, unsure of the path, uncertain of what awaited. But then I remembered the teachings. Clarity arises from presence, not foresight. I focus on each step, feeling the earth beneath my feet, the cool air on my skin, the subtle sounds of life awakening around me. Slowly, the fog seemed less threatening. The path revealed itself moment by moment. In that realization, I understood a profound truth. Life is always uncertain. But by grounding ourselves in awareness, we can navigate it with calm and clarity. Even mundane tasks became portals for insight. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, or preparing teach shack, approached with mindfulness, became a mirror for understanding the mind. I noticed impatience, frustration, and restlessness arising. And in observing them, I discovered their impermanence. I noticed gratitude, joy, and contentment, and allowed them to expand without clinging. The ordinary and the extraordinary merged, and I began to perceive the subtle patterns of life that had always been present but unnoticed. A particularly striking insight came from an interaction with a wandering monk who visited the monastery. He spoke of the human tendency to seek happiness externally, chasing achievements, possessions, or recognition, while neglecting the richness of the present moment. He told me, we are like travelers searching for water in a desert, unaware that we carry a spring within us. Every breath, every heartbeat, every conscious action is a drop from that spring. Drink deeply from it, and you will know joy. I reflected on how often I had sought fulfillment in distant goals or fleeting pleasures, and I felt a deep humility. True happiness, I realized, was not something to grasp, but something to recognize within the flow of life itself. By the end of this period, I found myself observing the world differently. The wind through the trees was no longer background noise. It was a teacher. The laughter of children no longer fleeting amusement. It was a lesson in joy and presence. The fleeting thoughts of my mind no longer enemies. They were messages, reflections, opportunities to cultivate understanding. I began to integrate these insights into every interaction. Every choice, every moment of awareness, life had become a living practice. Each encounter, each observation, each reflection was a doorway to insight. I began to understand that enlightenment was not a distant, unattainable goal, but a series of small awakenings stitched together in the ordinary fabric of life. In recognizing impermanence, embracing suffering as a teacher, and cultivating awareness and compassion, I found that the deepest lessons were not hidden in texts or teachings, but in the direct experience of living fully and consciously. And so, I continue to walk through the monastery grounds, sit by the pond, and breathe deeply, carrying with me the growing understanding that life's wisdom is not something to be possessed, but something to be realized, moment by moment, in the quiet observation of the mind, the body, and the world around us. Each insight felt like a small flame illuminating the path, showing that the journey itself is the teacher, and that in awareness, patience, and compassion, one can find the deepest and most enduring peace. As the days passed, I began to sense a subtle transformation within me, one that I could neither force nor fully articulate. It was not dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, like the slow unfolding of a bud in the morning sun. I noticed that my thoughts no longer had the same grip over me. Anxiety still arose, desires still appeared, but they no longer pulled me into chaos. I observed them as if from a distance, acknowledging their presence without allowing them to define me. The restlessness that had once dominated my mind was softening, replaced by a spaciousness I had never known. One morning, I sat by the pond, the surface perfectly still, reflecting the sky in its clarity. I watched a single leaf drift across the water, carried gently by a barely perceptible current. It struck me how effortless the leaf's journey seemed. It did not struggle against the water. It did not cling to the shore, it simply flowed. I realized then that I had spent so much of my life resisting the natural currents of my mind and the world, trying to grasp, control, and manipulate everything around me. The leaf showed me the truth of non-resistance. Liberation is not found in force, but in alignment with the natural flow of life. I remembered a story shared by the master during a quiet tea ceremony. He spoke of a bird trapped in a cage, struggling with frantic energy, pecking at the bars, unable to understand why it could not escape. A compassionate elder opened the cage and said, "Freedom is not in the absence of barriers, but in understanding the heart and mind that perceive them." The bird hesitated, then stepped forward, realizing that the moment it released the panic within, the cage itself felt less constraining. That story became a mirror for me. I understood that mental liberation begins not with external circumstances, but with inner awareness, with a letting go of fear, attachment, and clinging. I began practicing daily meditation with a renewed intention, not just to quiet the mind, but to examine it deeply, to see the patterns that cause suffering and to release them gently. I noticed how often I had resisted what was creating endless tension. I had feared uncertainty, clung to permanence, and chased fleeting pleasures. Through observation, I began to loosen those bindings. I allowed my thoughts to arise, to move, and to dissolve. I allowed emotions to flow through me without judgment. In that process, I felt a weight lifting, a freedom that was not from escaping life, but from fully engaging with it while remaining unattached. A vivid memory came to me of a young monk who had struggled with jealousy and comparison. He could not bear that others seemed to progress more quickly in meditation or receive more recognition in the monastery. One day, he confided his suffering to a master. The master instructed him to observe the rising of the sun each morning without speaking, judging, or comparing it to anything else. The young monk began the practice reluctantly but slowly. He noticed the sun's light illuminating everything equally, touching each blade of grass, each stone, each face without preference or envy. Through this simple observation, he realized that the mind, like the sun, need not discriminate. Jealousy, comparison, and self-criticism dissolved when awareness was applied without attachment. I reflected on my own tendencies to compare myself to others, to measure my worth by external standards, to let pride or insecurity dictate my reactions. I began to see that these mental habits were cages I had built for myself. By observing them without judgment, I could begin to loosen the bars, step by step, moment by moment. Each day, I felt more spaciousness within, a quiet confidence that did not rely on validation, achievement, or approval. It was a freedom rooted in self-awareness, self-compassion, and presence. Walking through the monastery gardens, I noticed how each action could become a practice of liberation. Carrying water, tending plants, preparing meals, task was an opportunity to release attachment to outcomes, to let go of impatience, and to cultivate mindfulness. Even simple gestures, like handing someone a cup of tea, became moments to practice generosity and presence. I realized that liberation was not a dramatic escape from life, but a deep, continual engagement with it, free from the compulsions of ego and fear. One evening, as I watched the sun set behind the mountains, a profound realization dawned on me. I had been seeking peace as if it were something external, something to grasp or achieve. But true liberation had been within me all along, waiting for recognition, waiting for the willingness to observe without attachment, to act without clinging, to live without fear. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for every story, every lesson, every moment that had guided me to this awareness. The teachings were no longer distant concepts. They were lived experiences woven into the fabric of my being. I also learned the subtle art of responding rather than reacting. When frustration arose, I paused and observed it. When irritation flickered, I noted it. When sadness appeared, I allowed it to flow without resistance. In this practice, I found that my mind became a clear mirror, reflecting life without distortion. The intensity of suffering diminished, replaced by clarity, balance, and compassion for myself and for others. I realized that liberation was not a state to be achieved in the future, but a present reality, accessible in every mindful breath, in every intentional action, in every moment of observation. One particular morning stands out in my memory. I had been struggling with lingering anger toward a friend who had wronged me in the past. I carried resentment like a stone in my chest, unwilling to release it, believing that holding on somehow preserved justice. I sought guidance from a senior monk who invited me to sit beside a stream. "Listen," he said, "the water flows. It does not resist the stones, nor does it cling to the leaves. Holding on to anger is like trying to stop the river. Watch it, feel it, and let it flow. You will be free when you no longer need it to define your heart." I closed my eyes, focusing on the sound of flowing water, allowing the anger to arise and pass naturally. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the weight in my chest lightened. I felt a liberation I had never experienced, freedom born not from forgetting, not from denying, but from releasing attachment. In the following days, I noticed the cumulative effect of these practices. My mind was less turbulent, my heart more open. I could meet challenges with patience, setbacks with equanimity, and joys without clinging. The sense of separation I had carried from the world, the feeling that life was something to endure or control, began to dissolve. I felt connected to the flow of life itself, a participant in a larger rhythm that neither demanded nor resisted, that simply was. Even mundane interactions became exercises in freedom. Speaking to fellow monks, engaging with visitors, observing the natural world, each offered a chance to practice non-attachment, compassion, and presence. The boundaries between practice and life blurred. I began to understand that true mental liberation is not found in seclusion alone, but in the way one lives fully and consciously in the midst of life's currents. By the end of this period, I felt a profound shift. I was no longer entirely defined by past habits, fears, or attachments. I experienced life with a clarity and lightness I had never known. Each moment became an opportunity to practice freedom, to observe, to act mindfully, to release, and to embrace the impermanent, unfolding nature of existence. Liberation, I realized, is not a distant goal. It is present in the very act of living, in the conscious recognition of each breath, each thought, and each step. Sitting quietly one evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the stories, the teachings, the simple acts of mindful living. I realized that transformation is a gradual unfolding, a series of small awakenings stitched together by awareness and intention. Liberation is not dramatic. It is subtle, patient, and persistent. It is found in the gentle observation of life, in the compassionate engagement with the world, in the willingness to let go of what no longer serves us. And in that awareness, I found a deep and abiding freedom that touched every aspect of my being, like sunlight filtering through the branches of an ancient tree, illuminating the path without force without haste, and without fear, as I sit quietly now, reflecting on the days I have spent within the monastery. I feel a sense of calm that is both profound and gentle, like the soft ripple of water against smooth stones. It is a calm that does not demand my attention or recognition. It simply exists, steady and patient. A quiet companion that has grown with me through observation, practice, and awareness. Looking back, I see how far I have traveled, not in distance, but in understanding. The restless mind that once ruled my every thought, the anxious heart that clung to outcomes, the constant craving for more, these patterns have begun to loosen, allowing space for something deeper, something enduring. I remember my first days here, when even a few minutes of stillness felt unbearable. My thoughts raced like a stormy sea, and the silence of the monastery seemed to echo my inner turmoil. I was desperate for peace, yet unprepared to meet it within myself. I sought answers outside, in stories, in teachings, in the gaze of those who seemed serene. Slowly, day by day, through small practices, small observations, I began to discover that the answers were never truly elsewhere. They were within me, waiting to be noticed, nurtured, and understood. Presence, patience, and compassion became my guides, teaching me that peace is not a reward or a destination, but a natural consequence of awareness and alignment with life. As I reflect on the stories I have been told and the lessons I have witnessed, I see a pattern emerging, a thread that connects every teaching, every insight, every experience. It is the thread of mindfulness, of conscious awareness in every moment. The young monk who learned to observe ripples on a pond, the farmer who found creation in loss, the child who played freely, the wandering traveler who realized the spring within each story echoes the same truth. Life, in its ordinary and extraordinary forms, is both teacher and lesson. By observing it fully, without clinging or aversion, we learn to respond wisely, to live compassionately, and to cultivate inner freedom. I feel gratitude for the moments that challenged me, for the discomfort that once seemed unbearable. Each difficulty has been a teacher, guiding me to observe my mind, to question my attachments, and to release patterns that no longer served me. Anger, jealousy, fear, and desire are not enemies to be fought. They are signals, reflections of attachment and resistance. By meeting them with awareness, acknowledging their presence and letting them pass, I have discovered a clarity that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds, quiet illumination that does not force, but simply reveals. The practice of mindful living has transformed the way I relate to the world. Every breath, every step, every simple action carries the potential for awakening. Preparing a meal, tending the garden, sweeping the courtyard, or offering a kind word, These seemingly ordinary acts are opportunities to embody wisdom. By approaching them with intention and awareness, I experience a sense of harmony that flows outward, touching others, creating ripples of presence and calm that extend far beyond my own perception. I recall the teachings about impermanence, which at first I found difficult to accept. Change had always seemed threatening, the loss of what I loved unbearable. But now I see that impermanence is not an enemy, but a teacher, a guide that reminds me to release clinging and to flow with the natural rhythms of life. The withering flower, the drifting cloud, the shifting sunlight, each embodies the truth that life is ever-changing, and that peace is found not in resistance, but in acceptance and presence. Even relationships, once a source of frustration and longing, have become mirrors for understanding and practice. I have learned to observe my reactions, to listen deeply, to respond with patience and compassion. Misunderstandings no longer feel like battles to be won, but opportunities to practice equanimity and empathy. I have begun to see others not as extensions of my desires or fears, but as fellow travelers on the path, each carrying their own lessons, each deserving of kindness and understanding. The liberation I feel now is subtle, yet profound. It is not the absence of challenges or the perfect absence of emotion, but the presence of awareness. The ability to meet life fully with clarity and compassion. Thoughts still arise, emotions still flow, circumstances still change, but I have learned to respond rather than react, to observe rather than cling. This freedom is not dramatic or flashy. It is quiet, steady, and enduring, like the steady beat of the heart or the slow unfolding of a leaf. Sitting here, I notice the sounds of the monastery, the distant chants, the soft rustle of leaves, the occasional call of a bird, and feel a deep connection to everything around me. Life is no longer something to control or escape. It is something to engage with fully, consciously, and compassionately. Each moment is both a teacher and a gift. Each breath, each thought, each sensation offers insight into the nature of existence, offering opportunities to awaken, to let go, and to embrace the present with openness and love. I think of the lessons that have shaped me most. The importance of observing without judgment, the value of patience in the face of discomfort, the power of compassion toward myself and others, the truth of impermanence, and the liberation that comes from releasing attachment. These teachings are not abstract. They are practical, lived, and tangible. I carry them in my mind, my heart, and my daily actions, knowing that they guide me toward a life of clarity, presence, and peace. As evening falls and the sun dips below the mountains, I feel a profound sense of completion, not as an end, but as a continuation of the journey. I am still learning, still observing, still practicing. Yet the turbulence that once defined me has quieted, replaced by a steady rhythm of awareness, acceptance, and compassion. The inner space I have cultivated allows me to meet life fully, to embrace uncertainty, and to act from a place of calm and clarity. In these final moments, I invite myself, and through these words, perhaps you as well, to breathe deeply, to notice the world around you, to observe your thoughts without clinging, to meet each experience with patience and compassion. Liberation is present in every breath, every sensation, every moment of mindful awareness. It is not something to chase, not something to grasp, but something to recognize, nurture, and live fully. I close my eyes, feeling the gentle rhythm of my heart, the subtle rise and fall of each breath, the soft presence of life unfolding around me. I feel a deep and abiding peace, a quiet contentment that does not depend on circumstance, a liberation that comes from seeing clearly, releasing attachment and living fully. And in this peaceful awareness, I rest, carrying the lessons, the stories, and the teachings with me, allowing them to guide every moment of my life, illuminating the path with the gentle light of understanding, compassion, and enduring calm. The world continues, as it always has, as it always will. But within me, there is stillness. Within me, there is clarity. Within me, there is freedom. And with each breath, each step, each moment of mindful presence, I carry that freedom into life, letting it touch everything I do, everything I see, and everything I become. As I sit quietly, I take a deep breath, feeling the gentle rise and fall of my chest. The world outside continues its endless rhythm, but here, in this moment, there is only stillness. I invite you to join me, not as a passive listener, but as a fellow traveler on this path of calm and awareness. Let the noise of the day drift away, carried off by the soft currents of your breath. In and out, slowly, gently. I can feel the weight of my thoughts, the subtle tension in my shoulders, the tightness around my mind. And yet, I remind myself that all of this is temporary. Like clouds passing across a vast sky, my worries, my regrets, my endless what-ifs, they come and go. Today, I choose to let them drift by, to watch them without clinging. I wonder if you can do the same, even for just these few minutes. I notice the little details of the room around me, the soft golden light spilling through a window, the faint hum of life outside, the gentle rhythm of my own heartbeat. Every sensation is a reminder that I am alive, that I am present. And as I focus on this moment, I feel a subtle shift. The constant chatter in my mind begins to soften, replaced by a quiet awareness that simply observes. Without judgment, I imagine a path winding through a serene forest, each step guided by mindfulness. The earth beneath my feet is soft, supporting me without resistance. A gentle breeze brushes against my skin, carrying the scent of earth and leaves. Somewhere above, sunlight filters through the trees, scattering delicate patterns of light across the path. I hear the distant song of a bird, a single note echoing through the stillness. I invite you to walk with me along this path. Feel each step deliberate and calm. Feel the earth grounding you, connecting you to the quiet strength that already exists within. Thoughts may still arise, plans, worries, memories. That is natural. But I remind myself and you that we do not need to follow them. They are leaves floating on the surface of a stream. We watch them pass without reaching for them, without being carried away. In this simple act of observation, we find freedom, a small space where the mind can rest. I take another breath, slower this time, feeling the air fill my lungs and then leave them. With each exhale, I let go of tension I did not even realize I was holding. The tightness in my chest, the restless thoughts, the subtle ache in my shoulders, I release them gently, like sand slipping through my fingers. I imagine this release extending beyond myself, touching the space around me, the room, the very air I breathe. Peace spreads quietly, unobtrusively, yet powerfully. As I sit here, I feel a deepening sense of presence. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply is. And in this quiet presence, I sense the beginning of something subtle, profound, a readiness to listen, to learn, to embrace the stories that follow. These stories are not just tales. They are mirrors, reflections of the wisdom hidden in everyday moments, waiting for those who are willing to see. I invite you now to close your eyes if you wish, or simply soften your gaze. Let your hands rest comfortably, your body fully supported. Let the sounds around you fade into the background, as though they were distant waves lapping at the shore. Let yourself exist only in this moment, this gentle space of calm. There is no need to do anything except breathe. Simply breathe and be present. In this quiet, I feel a gentle curiosity rising. What lessons lie ahead? What subtle truths await me in the stories of Zen and Buddhist teachings? I do not seek answers. I only remain open, attentive, receptive. The world may continue to rush and pull at me, but here I am anchored. Here there is stillness. Here there is peace. And so I begin this journey together with you, step by step, story by story. into the timeless wisdom that awaits. I notice the soft rhythm of my own thoughts, the gentle ebb of consciousness. A sense of spaciousness fills me, a room within my mind where nothing needs to be forced, nothing needs to be achieved. Each breath is an anchor, each heartbeat a quiet drum of life, reminding me that this moment, however fleeting, is enough. And in this enoughness, I feel the faint stirring of something warm, something expansive, a readiness to open to insight, a willingness to simply let the stories wash over me like a gentle stream. So, with a final, slow inhalation and exhalation, I invite you to settle in. Let the day's worries fall away. Let the stories come, not as instructions, not as lessons to memorize, but as gentle companions on this journey of awareness. And as we move forward together, I carry only a simple wish, that the peace I feel now may reach you too, and that for these next moments we can be fully present, fully alive, and fully at rest as I walk further along the quiet path of my mind. I begin to notice the small lessons hidden in the simplest moments. I recall a story I once heard from a Zen master, a tale so brief yet so powerful that its meaning seems to expand with each retelling. A young monk approached his teacher, burdened with worry about his future, consumed by thoughts of what he should do and who he should become. The master asked him to fetch water from a nearby stream. The boy ran to the stream, filled his bucket, and returned only to find the master laughing softly. "Did the water worry you as it flowed?" he asked. The boy paused, puzzled. "No," he replied. "It simply followed its path." The master nodded. "You too must follow your path without clutching at what comes or clinging to what goes. Like water, just be." I feel the simplicity of this lesson sinking in, like sunlight filtering through leaves. How often do I chase after outcomes, tethering myself to expectations, forgetting the natural flow of life. The stories remind me that peace is not found in resistance, but in acceptance, not in grasping, but in letting go. I picture the water in the stream, flowing effortlessly, glinting in the sun, carrying with it neither fear nor regret. Only presence, another memory, surfaces. A wandering monk once arrived at a village, seeking shelter. The villagers, noticing his humble appearance, offered him a place in the back of a barn. During the night, a fire broke out, consuming part of the village. By morning, the villagers were in panic, their possessions lost. Yet, the monk was calm. Sitting among the ruins, he smiled gently and said, "The fire has revealed what is impermanent." Let this remind you, everything changes. Cling not to what is fleeting, and suffering will lose its grip. I imagine myself witnessing that quiet calm, feeling the weight of fear lift from my shoulders. The lesson is simple, yet profound. To resist life's impermanence is to invite unnecessary suffering. To embrace it is to find freedom. I recall another moment. A story told of a Zen master and a student walking through the forest. The student asked, "Master, how can I truly know enlightenment?" The master paused, picked up a leaf from the path, and held it between his fingers. "See this leaf," he said. "It does not try to be anything other than what it is. It neither worries about the future nor regrets the past. It simply exists. Enlightenment is no more complicated than this leaf being itself." I breathe in deeply, imagining the leaf in my hand, its edges soft yet defined, its green vibrant against the muted forest floor. I realize that so much of my own striving is a distraction from simply existing fully, from embracing each moment exactly as it is. And yet, the teachings are not always so calm or gentle. I remember a story of a master who, during a harsh winter, instructed his students to wash in a freezing stream each morning. They shivered, complained, doubted, yet he insisted. One day, a student asked, "Master, why must we endure such cold?" The master replied, "Pain and discomfort are not enemies. They teach awareness, presence, and resilience. When you feel the cold fully, without resisting, you discover your strength and your mind's clarity." I close my eyes and feel the imagined cold against my skin, the tension and release, the awakening of senses I usually take for granted. The story reminds me that even discomfort holds wisdom, and suffering, when embraced mindfully, transforms into insight. I think of a tale told in a quiet temple, where a master set before his students 2 bowls, one filled to the brim with tea, the other empty. "If you are full of your own ideas," he said, "there is no space to receive anything new." He poured tea from the full bowl into the empty one, watching the overflow spill. "Empty your mind," he instructed, "and then learning can flow like tea into an open cup." I feel my own minds clutter the endless thoughts, opinions, judgments, sense the truth in his words. To learn, to experience, to see clearly, I must release my attachments to preconceptions and make room for understanding to enter. A story rises from memory, simple yet vivid. A student asked his master, "How can I overcome fear?" The master led him to a cliff's edge and gestured toward the vast expanse below. "See how the wind does not resist the cliff, how the birds fly freely." He asked, "Fear grips you only when you try to control what is beyond your reach. Let go, trust the vastness of life. Like the wind, move freely." I feel the vertigo of the cliff in my imagination, the expansiveness of the sky, the liberation in releasing control. Fear, I realize, is often a tether of my own making, not a force imposed by the world. I notice that each story, though simple, resonates deeply. A farmer once approached a Zen master, lamenting his endless toil and the hardship of his fields. The master asked him, "Do you plant seeds to control the harvest, or do you plant to live fully in the act of planting?" The farmer paused, and for the first time, he saw his work not as a burden, but as a meditation. Each action complete in itself. I reflect on my own daily tasks, the washing of dishes, the folding of clothes, the simple acts I often perform with haste or distraction. What if each moment could be fully embraced, lived as a meditation? I recall a story that brings a smile even now. A monk, eager to impress his master, sought the ultimate teaching. The master handed him a broom. "Sweep," he said. The monk protested, expecting profound words. "Sweep carefully, sweep fully," said the master. The universe is contained in the act of sweeping if you are present. Enlightenment is not in seeking grandeur, but in wholehearted attention to each simple task. I chuckle softly to myself, imagining my own impatience, the urge to seek more, and how often I overlook the quiet profundity in simple acts. Another tale. A traveler came across a Zen garden and asked, "Why are the stones arranged so?" The gardener replied, "Each stone is exactly where it should be. Yet if it moves, the garden will adapt." Life, like this garden, is about balance and harmony. Change is inevitable, yet it does not disturb the essence of things. I feel the stability in the garden, the fluidity in its arrangement, the lesson that life's changes need not shake the calm within. Through these stories, I realize that Zen teachings are less about complicated doctrines and more about presence, awareness, and simplicity. Each story is a mirror, reflecting the truths I already hold but often forget. That life flows like water, that impermanence is natural, that fear and discomfort are teachers, and that enlightenment is found not in grandeur but in the ordinary. Fully lived moments as I walk further along this imagined path. I notice the quiet rhythm of the forest around me, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of insects. The soft whisper of the windage is a gentle teacher. Each is a story waiting to be heard if I only pay attention. I remind myself that wisdom does not always arrive in words. It arrives in presence, in the delicate observation of life unfolding around me. And so, I sit by the stream again, watching the water flow. Each droplet catches the light. Each ripple carries a lesson: patience, acceptance, simplicity, awareness. I feel gratitude for these stories, for the masters who told them, for the moments of insight they offer. They are not instructions to follow blindly. but invitations to experience life fully, to live each moment with calm attentiveness, to find peace even amidst the ever-changing currents of existence. I breathe in slowly, and as I exhale, I feel the subtle shift within. My mind, once restless, now carries a gentle steadiness. My heart, once hurried, now beats in rhythm with the quiet pulse of the present. The stories, brief and simple though they are, have left traces of insight, seeds planted in the fertile soil of awareness. I sense that with each step along this path, with each story absorbed, I am learning the art of mindful living, the quiet strength of presence, the profound freedom of simply being. I sit quietly, feeling the gentle rise and fall of my chest, noticing the subtle rhythm of my breath. The world outside continues in its constant motion, but here, in this small space of awareness, time seems to slow. I invite you to breathe with me, slowly, deliberately, feeling the air as it enters, fills, and leaves your lungs. Inhale and feel the subtle expansion within. Exhale and let go of tension, of thought, of worry. In this calm, I recall the stories of monks who spent hours, days, and even years in meditation. Yet their wisdom was never about how long they could sit. It was about presence, about noticing the movements of the mind, the subtle stirrings of emotion, the patterns of thought that pass like clouds. I think of one monk who, sitting by a still pond, noticed a ripple disturb the reflection of the moon. He realized that even a small disturbance can change perception, and yet the pond itself remains whole and calm. I reflect on this. Disturbances will come in life, but the essence of who I am, the quiet center within, remains untouched if I observe without attachment. Another story comes to mind. A student once asked his master, "How do I quiet my mind when so many thoughts crowded?" The master led him to a garden where a single flower bloomed amidst fallen leaves. "Watch it," the master instructed, "and notice the wind, the sunlight, the way the flower bends but does not break. The mind is like this flower. Thoughts come and go, but you remain the silent observer." I close my eyes and imagine the flower, delicate yet resilient, bowing gently to the world yet rooted firmly. My own mind begins to settle, each thought rising and falling, acknowledged but not clung to. I remember a winter morning, crisp and still, when a monk sat before a frozen lake. He observed the ice, the patterns etched upon it, the occasional crack that formed and disappeared. "Meditation is like the ice," he said, "rigid if you force it, yet flexible and revealing if you allow it to form naturally. Do not force calm. Cultivate it gently, like water freezing at its own pace." I feel the truth of this as I sit here, noticing the urge to control my thoughts, to demand stillness. Instead, I simply observe, letting the calm arise naturally. Like the gentle solidifying of water into ice, I think of a story where a wandering monk encountered a village in chaos. People shouting, machines clanging, dogs barking. He sat in the center of it all, eyes closed, yet completely present. Passers-by were startled, wondering how he could remain calm amidst such noise. The monk opened his eyes slowly and said, "Peace is not the absence of sound. Peace is the presence of awareness. When you are fully awake to this moment, the noise cannot disturb the quiet within." I feel a deep resonance with this story. My own life is filled with constant distraction, yet I realize that inner peace is available at any moment. If only I turn my attention inward. I recall another teaching. A master asked his students to sit silently facing a wall. Hours passed. One student became restless and asked, "Is this all we do? Just stare at a wall?" The master smiled. "The wall is not the point. Your mind is. Watch it. Notice every thought, every emotion, every impulse. This is the meditation." I sense my own restlessness arise as I reflect on this. How often do I seek external change when the true work lies in observing myself? The wall is simply a mirror. The meditation simply a lens into the mind's nature. I am reminded of a story about a student who struggled with anger. He visited his master, confessing, "I cannot control my anger. It overwhelms me." The master took him to a river and asked him to hold a handful of water tightly. The student did so, but soon the water slipped through his fingers. Anger, like water, cannot be held forcefully, the master explained. Observe it, allow it to flow, and it loses its power over you. I let it go, noticing the subtle release, the lightness that follows. I think of the story of the bamboo forest. A monk would meditate there for hours, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. One day, a student asked, "Master, what are you learning from the bamboo?" The master replied, "The bamboo bends, but does not break. It moves with the wind, yielding yet strong." The mind, like the bamboo, must learn flexibility. Rigidity leads to suffering. Adaptability leads to peace. I feel the gentle sway of the bamboo in my mind's eye. Each movement a reminder that flexibility, patience, and presence are the keys to inner harmony. Another story comes to mind. A monk once sat before a burning candle, its flame flickering yet steady. "Watch it," he told his students. "Notice how the flame moves, yet does not disappear. Notice the shadows it casts." Meditation is like this flame. Thoughts may flicker, emotions may cast shadows, yet the essence, the light of awareness remains constant. I focus on my own inner light, feeling it steady and warm. A quiet presence untouched by the flickering of passing thoughts. I recall a tale of a master and his student walking along a riverbank. The student asked, "How do I know I am progressing?" The master picked up a handful of sand and let it slip through his fingers. Do not seek signs outside yourself. Progress is subtle like this sand. Each grain counts, yet it cannot be grasped. Awareness itself is progress. I feel the subtle shifts within me, the small moments of clarity, the gentle insight that arises from attention. I realize that meditation is not a goal, but a practice, a living reflection of presence as I sit in silence. I remember the story of a monk who watched the sunset each evening without fail. One day, a student asked, "Why watch it so closely? Does it teach anything new?" The master replied, "Every sunset is the same, yet never the same." Life, like the sunset, offers endless lessons if we watch with attention. Meditation is learning to see each moment fully, to experience it as if for the first time. I feel the warmth of the imagined sun on my face, the fading light painting the sky, and I understand that mindfulness is not about repetition, but about freshness, noticing the richness in every fleeting moment. I notice my breath again, slower now, deeper, merging with the rhythm of the stories I carry in my mind. Each story, each reflection, is a mirror for my own life. The moments of insight are quiet, subtle, yet powerful. They remind me that meditation is not about escaping life, but embracing it fully. Noticing each sensation, each thought, each emotion without judgment. I feel the tension in my shoulders release further, the mind softening, the heart opening. Another story surfaces. A master asked his student to place a pebble in a stream each day. At first, the student questioned the purpose, but over time, he noticed how each pebble changed the water's flow, creating ripples, altering patterns. The master said, "Your actions, however small, shape the world." Meditation makes you aware of this, showing you the delicate balance between intention and impact. I reflect on my own small actions, realizing that presence amplifies their meaning. Every breath, every thought, every gesture carries subtle significance. As I sit beside an imagined stream, I watch leaves float on the water, noticing their movement, their impermanence. I feel a deepening calm, a connection to the natural rhythm of life. The stories of meditation and reflection are not distant teachings. They are invitations, gentle prompts to awaken, to notice, to rest in the awareness that is always present. I sense the quiet strength of being fully alive in each moment, aware of the flow of life, yet untouched by its turbulence. I take a slow breath, feeling it fill my chest, completely and exhale with intention, releasing all lingering tension. I feel grounded, present, connected to the small truths revealed in these stories. Meditation is not a task, not a challenge, not a goal. It is a returning home to the simplicity of awareness, to the gentle noticing of life unfolding as it is. With this awareness, I prepare to continue along the path, carrying the lessons of observation, presence, and gentle reflection. Each story, each moment of insight guides me toward a deeper understanding of myself, of life, and of the quiet, subtle wisdom that surrounds us always. I am ready to move forward, step by step, story by story, deeper into the peaceful heart of Zen. As I continue along this quiet path of awareness, I realize that each story, each moment of stillness carries within it lessons for my own life. It is not just about listening, observing, or meditating. It is about noticing the subtle threads that connect these teachings to my daily existence. I feel the gentle hum of life, whispering the wisdom of countless moments and countless lives lived with attention and care. I think of a story of a farmer who lived simply, tending his fields with quiet diligence. One day, a city visitor asked him, "Why do you work so hard for so little?" The farmer smiled and said, "I do not work for wealth or recognition. I work for presence." Each moment spent in the soil, feeling the earth, listening to the wind, is a lesson in living fully. I reflect on this, noticing how often I chase outcomes, rewards, or acknowledgement, forgetting that the act of living itself, fully attended, is a reward in itself. Life is not only about what I achieve, it is about how present I am as I act. I remember another story. A master asked a student to carry a cup of water through the temple, careful not to spill a single drop. The student stumbled, the water spilled, and he felt frustrated. The master said, "Do not be frustrated. Each drop teaches you focus, patience, and humility." Life's lessons are often found in small, repeated actions, not in grand gestures. I feel the truth in this as I reflect on my own daily life, the moments I rush through, the tasks I deem insignificant. What lessons might they hold if I approach them with mindful attention? Even the simplest act, if observed fully, can reveal profound truths. I recall a story about a student who asked a Zen master, "How can I find happiness?" The master handed him a stone and asked him to hold it gently. "Happiness," the master said, "is like holding this stone. Too tight, and it causes discomfort. Too loose, and it slips away. Find balance. Attend to life without clinging, and peace will follow." I notice my own tendencies to grasp too tightly at experiences, relationships, and expectations. How often do I make myself suffer by holding too tightly, by demanding that life bend to my desires? The stone in my hand reminds me to loosen my grip, to flow with life, and to accept each moment as it comes. I think of the story of a monk who walked each day to a river, observing the fish swimming beneath the surface. He marveled at their freedom, their effortless movement. One day, a student asked, "What do you learn from the fish?" The master replied, "The fish do not worry about tomorrow, nor do they lament yesterday. They are fully alive in each stroke, each breath, each movement. Life is to be experienced fully, without clinging to what has passed or what may come." I reflect on my own preoccupations with the past and the future, realizing how much energy I spend on what is not present. True life is found in this moment, in the simple act of living fully here and now. I recall another teaching. A master gave his students a simple bowl of rice and asked them to eat with complete attention, noticing each grain, each texture, each taste. At first, they grew impatient, finding it trivial, but soon the subtlety of the experience unfolded. The ordinary, the master explained, is extraordinary when attended to fully. Life is found in these small acts of awareness. I imagine myself eating, drinking, walking, speaking, attending fully to each moment. Even the most mundane activities hold the potential for insight if approached with mindfulness. A story comes to mind of a master and a student walking through a bamboo grove. The student asked, "How can I know I am growing spiritually?" The master paused, touching the bamboo gently. "See how the bamboo bends in the wind without breaking. Growth is not always visible. Strength is not always loud. Look to the subtle, to the resilient, to the steady presence that endures. True wisdom is quiet, like the bamboo, adaptable yet unshaken." I feel the subtlety of this teaching, recognizing that much of my growth, too, may be silent, unnoticed by others, yet real and enduring within me. I think of a monk who once instructed his students to sit by a stream and observe the flow of water. He told them, "Life flows like this stream. Do not resist it. Do not try to control it. Watch it. Learn from it. In your observation, you will find clarity, patience, and understanding." I close my eyes and visualize the stream, the water weaving around stones, glinting in the sun, always moving, yet always the same. I feel my own mind softening, noticing the moments I resist change, the moments I cling to certainty. Life, like the stream, is fluid. By allowing it to flow, I release unnecessary struggle and gain insight. Another story surfaces, A student asked his master, "How can I handle anger?" The master handed him a piece of burning coal and asked him to hold it. The student hesitated, and the master said, "Anger is like this coal. Holding it harms only you. Let it pass, observe it, and do not let it burn your heart." I imagine the sensation, the heat of the coal, and realize how often I carry anger, resentment, and frustration as if they are mine to keep. By observing without clinging, by letting go, I free myself and discover space for understanding and compassion. I recall a story of a master and a child. The child asked, "Why is life so difficult?" The master smiled and said, "Life is difficult because we resist it. We fight what is instead of embracing it. Observe life fully, accept it fully, and difficulty transforms into understanding. Each challenge is a teacher, each struggle an opportunity for insight." I feel the subtle shift within, recognizing the times I have resisted reality, creating unnecessary suffering. Each challenge I face, each difficulty I encounter, carries within it a seed of wisdom if I am willing to notice. I remember another teaching. A student once complained that the world was unfair, that life offered too many hardships. The master took him to a cliff and said, "See the vast horizon. Life is wide and infinite. Some storms will come, some winds will blow, but the sky itself remains. You too must find the expanse within yourself. Your mind, when open, contains freedom beyond circumstance." I imagine standing at the cliff, feeling the wind, seeing the endless sky, and sensing the freedom that comes from releasing judgment, blame, and attachment. A simple story remains in my mind. A monk once told his students, "The mind is like a garden. If you plant weeds of anger, fear, and attachment, they will grow. If you plant seeds of patience, kindness, and awareness, they will flourish. Tend your garden daily." I reflect on my own inner garden, realizing how often I let weeds grow unchecked and how a small, mindful effort each day can cultivate a space of beauty, peace, and clarity. I recall a master who asked his students to carry a single pebble in their pocket for a week, reminding them, "This pebble is a reminder of attention. Notice how it feels. Notice how often you forget it, and then notice it again." Life is filled with small reminders, small truths waiting to be observed. Awareness is cultivated in the small, repeated acts of noticing. I feel the weight of an imagined pebble in my hand, a symbol of mindfulness, of presence, of life attended to fully. I sit once more, breathing slowly, noticing the subtle effects of these stories on my mind and heart. I feel patience growing, clarity unfolding, and a quiet sense of understanding settling within. The lessons of Zen are not loud or forceful. They arrive gently, like dew on morning leaves, like sunlight through the trees, like the subtle ripples of a calm stream. They invite me to live fully, to notice deeply, and to act with presence. Each story, each reflection, carries a thread of insight to accept impermanence, to release attachment, to observe without judgment, to embrace life fully, to cultivate awareness in small actions, to transform challenges into understanding, to find freedom within. I feel these threads weaving into the fabric of my being, quiet, subtle, yet unshakable. I breathe in deeply, sensing the life and movement around me, and exhale with gentle gratitude. I am aware that these lessons are not distant teachings. They are living truths. They are here in the air I breathe, the path I walk, the thoughts I notice, the choices I make. As I continue this journey, I carry these insights with me, allowing them to shape my perception, my actions, and my understanding of the world. As I sit quietly, I feel the stillness within me deepen. The gentle rhythm of my breath has become a soft anchor, guiding me through layers of thought and emotion that I did not even realize I carried. In this calm, I notice the subtle stirrings of transformations, almost imperceptible shifts in perception, a gentle loosening of the grip of old patterns, a softening of the mind's resistance. I sense that mental liberation is not a sudden explosion, but a gradual unfolding, like the slow opening of a lotus flower at dawn. I recall a story of a young monk who struggled with fear. Every night, shadows seemed to haunt his small room, and every sound felt like a threat. One day, his teacher asked him to sit and observe the shadows without fleeing or resisting. At first, he trembled, but slowly, he began to notice that the shadows were nothing more than shapes, shifting with the light, impermanent and harmless. With each night of observation, his fear diminished. He discovered that fear only has power when we give it attention, when we chase it or try to deny it. In my own mind, I sense similar shadows, old doubts, anxieties, and fears, and I feel a quiet courage arise, a willingness to observe without clinging, to let each fear dissolve like mist in the morning sun. Another teaching comes to mind. A master asked his students to carry a cup of water across a courtyard, but not to spill a single drop. Many rushed, stumbled, and poured water on the ground. One student moved slowly, carefully, fully attentive. The master said, "To move with awareness is to transform ordinary action into meditation. Mindfulness is liberation." Each act observed fully opens a door to freedom. I imagine myself carrying this cup, each movement deliberate, each step conscious. The rush of everyday life fades, and in this focus, I feel a subtle release, a liberation from the hurry, the tension, and the scattered thoughts that often dominate my mind. I think of a story about a wandering monk who encountered a village caught in chaos. People arguing, hurrying, and clinging to outcomes. The monk simply walked through the village, calm and unhurried, offering a small smile or a kind word where he could. Villagers, observing him, began to slow, to breathe, to notice the present moment. Transformation, I realize, often begins quietly, in the ripple created by one mind fully awake. My own thoughts, if approached with attention, can generate similar ripples, easing tension and fostering clarity within. I remember a story of a master and his student standing by a river. The student asked, "Master, how can I let go of anger?" The master picked up a handful of water and let it slip through his fingers. "Anger is like water," he said. "The tighter you hold it, the more it harms you. Let it flow. Observe it. Release it, and freedom emerges." I feel my own tight grip on frustration, resentment, and worry, and I imagine letting them slip gently, noticing their presence without attachment, and feeling the subtle shift of tension leaving my mind. Liberation is in letting go. Yet, in doing so, I do not feel emptiness. I feel space, clarity, and a quiet lightness. I recall the story of a monk who meditated under a tree for years. One day, a traveler asked, "How have you changed after all this time?" The monk replied, "I have not changed in the way you might think. The world remains, but I see it differently. I am no longer entangled in what is not real, in illusions and attachments." Liberation is not escape. It is clarity, presence, and freedom from what binds the mind. I reflect on my own attachments, habits, judgments, expectations, sense the first stirrings of detachment, a willingness to see things as they are, without grasping or resisting. Another teaching surfaces. A student asked a master, "How can I find peace?" The master handed him a bell and told him to ring it whenever he felt disturbed. The sound resonated, clear and pure, cutting through distraction and restlessness. "Peace," the master said, "is always available, but you must remember it." The mind's liberation comes in awareness, in remembering the still point within yourself, even amidst turmoil. I imagine ringing that bell in my mind, each vibration reminding me of calm, of presence, of the clarity that exists beyond thought and worry. I recall a story of a monk who watched the seasons change from a small temple. He observed leaves falling, rain washing the courtyard, snow blanketing the earth. One day, a student asked, "How do you endure these cycles?" The master replied, "I do not endure. I witness. In witnessing, I am free. All things pass. To cling is suffering. To observe is liberation. I feel the cycles within my own mind, the rise and fall of emotions, the passing of thoughts, and I sense a quiet freedom in observation, a growing understanding that my awareness need not be consumed by what comes and goes. I think of a tale where a master asked a student to sit by a flame, watching its movement. See how it dances yet remains light, the master said. Your mind, too, moves and shifts. Observe it fully, and you will find that the essence of awareness is constant, untouched by the turbulence. I focus on my own inner light, the calm awareness that exists beneath my thoughts, beneath my emotions. With each observation, I feel tension dissolve, a gentle liberation from the mental chatter that often dominates my day. Another story comes to mind. A student carried heavy burdens on his back, both physical and emotional. The master instructed him to lay them down one by one, observing the relief with each release. The mind carries invisible weights, the master said. Notice them, release them. You will find the freedom you seek. I imagine setting down my own burdens, seeing them fall gently to the ground, feeling my shoulders lighten, my chest open, my mind expand. Liberation is not in avoiding difficulty, but in letting go of resistance, in acknowledging and releasing what no longer serves. I recall a story of a master who taught his students to walk slowly, deliberately, feeling each step as if the earth itself were sacred. One student asked, "Why walk so slowly?" The master replied, "The mind moves too quickly. By slowing the body, you slow the mind. Attention grows. Liberation emerges." I slow my own imaginary steps, noticing the subtle sensations in my feet, my legs, my posture. I realize how often I rush through life, missing the richness of each experience. In deliberate awareness, I find freedom, a liberation born not of external circumstances, but of internal presence. I remember the story of a student who feared loss. The master gave him a single grain of rice and said, "What you fear losing is impermanent. Observe it fully. Care for it without grasping. Life itself is impermanent. Awareness frees you from clinging." I reflect on the impermanence in my own life, the fleeting nature of experiences, relationships, and emotions, and I feel a growing sense of ease, a liberation from the illusion that I can hold or control what is always changing. Another teaching rises within me. A monk told his students to watch the sky, noticing clouds drifting without effort. Your mind, he said, is like these clouds. Thoughts arise, move, and pass. Observe them without clinging. In this observation, you find freedom. I imagine my thoughts as clouds, rising and falling, shifting shapes and colors. I observe them, neither resisting nor chasing, and I feel the subtle release of control. A liberation in simply being present with what is dot. As I sit in this quiet, I notice the gentle strength within myself. The mind, once restless and burdened, now feels lighter, clearer, more spacious. I realize that mental liberation is not about escaping life, but about engaging with it fully, with awareness, without clinging, without fear. Transformation comes not from effort alone, but from presence, observation, and a willingness to let go. I take a slow, deep breath, feeling it expand through my chest and into every corner of my being. With each exhale, I release the remnants of tension, of fear, of resistance. I feel a warmth, a lightness, a subtle expansion of consciousness. The stories, the teachings, the reflections, they have not imposed wisdom upon me. They have guided me to remember the freedom that already exists within. I sense that I am changing, quietly, imperceptibly. Old habits of mind lose their grip. Patterns of thought that once controlled me now pass like shadows at dusk. Awareness is growing, subtle yet powerful, illuminating the corners of my mind, softening the edges of my ego, revealing the space of peace that has always been there. Transformation, I realize, is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not measured by others. It is a gentle unfolding, a daily return to presence, a continuous release of what binds and limits. Mental liberation is the result of mindful attention, of observing without clinging, of allowing life to move through me without resistance. And in this liberation, I find an extraordinary peace, a calm clarity, a profound readiness to embrace life exactly as it is. I settle deeper into this quiet space, feeling the soft rhythm of my breath, steady and natural, like waves gently washing against the shore. My body is heavy yet light, fully supported by the earth beneath me, and my mind begins to soften, releasing the scattered thoughts of the day. With each inhalation, I draw in calmness. With each exhalation, I release tension, stress, and lingering distractions. I feel a gentle warmth spreading through my chest, a quiet presence that has always been here, patiently waiting for me to notice it as I breathe. I recall the path that has led me here, the stories I have heard, the moments I have reflected upon, the gentle lessons of Zen that have guided me to this place of inner stillness. I remember the young monk who watched the rippling water and realized that fear, like the ripples, arises and passes, leaving the stillness beneath untouched. I recall the student who observed the flickering candle and learned that awareness can remain steady even amidst the fluctuations of thought and emotion. These lessons are no longer just stories. They are threads weaving into the fabric of my being, creating a tapestry of quiet understanding, presence, and inner peace. I notice the gentle rise and fall of my chest, the subtle vibrations of my body, and I begin to imagine each breath as a wave, washing over me with a soothing rhythm. The wave carries away all remaining tension, all lingering worries, all thoughts that no longer serve me. I feel a gentle surrender, a willingness to let go completely, knowing that in this moment I am exactly where I am meant to be. There is nothing to fix, nothing to change, nothing to achieve. There is only this presence, this awareness, this quiet, open space that exists beyond effort and expectation. I bring to mind a story of a master who guided his students to lie down under a canopy of stars, to observe the vastness of the sky and the slow passage of clouds. Sleep is not an escape, he said, but a return to the natural rhythm of life. Just as the stars do not cling to their light, and the clouds do not resist their journey, so too must we allow ourselves to drift gently into rest. I picture myself lying beneath the endless sky, the soft coolness of night embracing me, the gentle hum of the universe surrounding me with quiet comfort. In this visualization, I feel the body melting into the mattress, the mind dissolving into awareness, the heart opening to a deep, tranquil acceptance of being. Another story comes to mind. A monk, weary from the day, sat by a still pond as the sun set, reflecting the colors of the sky upon its surface. He watched as a gentle breeze disturbed the water, creating ripples that danced and disappeared. The master said, "Rest is not found by resisting the day or clinging to wakefulness. It is found by observing, letting go, and allowing life to flow through you." Sleep is the natural continuation of mindfulness. I feel the gentle undulation of my own inner pond, noticing thoughts arising and passing like ripples on water. I allow each one to fade naturally, returning my attention to the calm beneath, to the quiet, steady presence that has always been there. I take a slow, deep breath, imagining it filling not just my lungs, but my entire being with light and calm. And as I exhale, I feel every muscle, every nerve, every fiber of my body releasing, softening, and surrendering. My hands rest lightly at my sides, my legs fully relaxed, my shoulders melting away from the ears, the jaw softening, the forehead smooth. Each breath carries me closer to a state of gentle, natural ease. The body is fully supported, the mind gently present, the heart open and unburdened. I recall the story of a master who taught his students to observe their day as if it were a river, noting each event, each emotion, each thought, and allowing them to pass without clinging. The day flows, he said, and so must your mind. Do not hold onto what has passed. Do not worry about what is yet to come. Be present, and you will find rest. I feel the day sliding softly behind me, like water flowing past my feet. I release regrets, small frustrations, lingering tension, and all unfinished thoughts. Each one drifts away gently, leaving a quiet, expansive space within me. I bring to mind the image of a candle flame, steady and unwavering, despite the movement of air around it. My awareness rests upon this light, feeling its warmth, its steady presence, its quiet strength. Thoughts may arise like shadows, emotions may flicker like wind. Yet the essence of calm remains untouched, serene, eternal. I allow this image to fill me, to anchor me, to guide me deeper into this state of restful presence. I remember the story of a student who, struggling with insomnia, was instructed to lie down and visualize a single leaf floating on a calm pond. Watch it drift, the master said. Notice how it moves effortlessly, without striving, without resistance. Let your mind follow the leaf, drifting gently, naturally, freely. I imagine that leaf now, floating softly on a serene pond, each movement guided by the gentle currents. My mind follows its path effortlessly, drifting with it, letting go of control, letting go of effort, letting go of tension. Each exhale carries me closer to the quiet, untroubled flow of rest. I sense the gentle release of all lingering thoughts, all mental chatter. The inner dialogue softens, the internal critic quiets, the scattered attention coalesces into a gentle focus upon presence. I feel the warmth of gratitude rising quietly within, a soft acknowledgement of this moment, of this breath, of this life. Gratitude for the guidance of the stories, for the wisdom of the masters, for the simple, profound gift of being alive and aware. I recall another story. A monk, before sleep, would repeat silently a phrase, a simple awareness: I am here, I am safe, I am at peace. The repetition was not a chant, but a gentle alignment with the present moment, a soft returning to the body, the breath, the mind. I begin to do the same, feeling each word resonate within me, harmonizing with the rhythm of my breath, settling the mind and soothing the heart. I am here. I am safe. I am at peace. Each repetition carries me deeper, slower, calmer. I notice the subtle energy shifting in my body, the shoulders sinking further, the spine resting fully, the legs heavy, the head lightly supported. A soft warmth spreads from the chest outward, a gentle expansion of comfort and ease. My awareness rests lightly on the body, the breath, the soft space between thoughts. Sleep is not forced. It is invited, welcomed with gentle acceptance. I am ready to drift, to surrender. To release fully, I bring to mind the story of the lotus, rising from the mud, yet remaining unstained, floating with grace upon the water's surface. My mind, like the lotus, rises above the noise, the tension, the clutter, remaining serene, free, aware. I feel a gentle liberation, a quiet transformation, a profound calm washing over every corner of my being. All that is unnecessary slips away, leaving only this quiet presence, this gentle awareness, this readiness for rest. I imagine now a forest at dusk, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds settling for the night, the faint whisper of wind through the branches. I am lying among these trees, the cool earth beneath me, the vast sky above me, the gentle sounds enveloping me. I feel the unity of my breath with the rhythm of nature, my heartbeat with the pulse of life. In this unity, I am fully present, fully aware, fully at ease. I notice the thoughts that arise, gently letting them pass, like clouds drifting across the sky. Never clinging, never resisting. I return softly to the breath, to the body, to the calm. With each breath, the mind settles deeper, the heart opens wider, the body rests more fully. I am grounded, I am present, I am at peace. The stories of Zen, the gentle teachings, the reflections have guided me to this place, not to an external destination, but to the inner sanctuary that has always existed. I feel the profound simplicity of this realization. Rest is always available. Peace is always present, and liberation is found in the gentle, quiet practice of attention, acceptance, and letting go as I lie here. Preparing for sleep, I feel a wave of gratitude, a wave of calm, a wave of openness. I allow the day, the mind, the body, the world to settle into this gentle rhythm of night. I surrender fully, trusting the natural flow of life, the natural return to rest, the gentle unfolding of awareness, even as consciousness drifts toward sleep. With each breath, I sink deeper, more fully into calmness. With each heartbeat, I feel lighter, freer, and more expansive. I allow the stories, the teachings, the reflections to echo softly in the background of my mind, like a quiet lullaby guiding me into deep, restorative sleep. I am ready to rest. I am ready to let go. I am ready to drift. The mind is calm, the body is relaxed, the heart is open. Peace flows through me effortlessly, naturally, completely. The light of awareness remains gentle and steady, even as I surrender into the soft, restorative embrace of sleep. And so, I breathe slowly, deeply, completely, knowing that I am safe, that I am present, that I am at peace. Each exhale carries me further into the quiet, expansive stillness. Each inhale draws in gentle awareness, and I allow myself to drift fully, gently, serenely into the night.